The section that we're looking at today, I want to look at two things from it. One of them is this incredible statement that Peter makes in verse 16 when he says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. The other thing, which we'll talk about first, is what Jesus means when he says, "On this rock I will build my church." And this is something that's been argued a lot, especially over the last 500 years or so, since the start of the Protestant Reformation. So Matthew 16, verses 16 through 18 read, "Simon Peter answered, 'You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God.' Jesus replied, 'Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it.'" The question that we love to argue about is upon what is Jesus building his church? Now, the Roman Catholic Church tends to believe that this is Peter, that Peter is the rock, and on this rock, on Peter, Jesus will build his church. And this has led to a succession of popes within the Catholic Church over many, many years. Peter is considered to be the first pope of the Roman Catholic Church. The name of the basilica in Vatican City is St. Peter's Basilica. The remains of Peter are buried under St. Peter's in Vatican. I don't know if that's just tradition. I think they've actually found the burial spot for Peter recently. If you have a chance to look up the history of that site, it's really, really fascinating. You can learn about Peter's upside-down crucifixion and his burial. Tradition has it, Peter requested to be crucified upside down because he said, "I'm not worthy to be crucified the same way that Christ was." So for this tradition, the rock is Peter. So if you don't know, Peter in Greek is Petros, meaning rock. Petros is the masculine form, Petra is the feminine form. So for those of you who are language scholars and understand some language have these gendered nouns, that can be part of your trivia for today. But I mentioned the masculine and feminine forms because that's going to be part of our argument here in just a couple minutes. And we're going to call that argument number one, that Peter is the rock upon which Jesus is going to build his church. So argument number two is the Protestant argument. We're Protestants, by the way. More importantly, we're Christians, but as a Baptist church, we're a product of the Protestant Reformation. Now, you might want to put some boots on because we're going to get really deep here with some things in a good way. But argument two, our argument tends to say that Jesus doesn't mean Peter when he says, "On this rock I will build my church." He means Peter's confession that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And on that statement, on that fact, Jesus will build his church. Not on Peter, but on the statement Peter makes. So the first question we really need to answer is, what does Jesus mean when he says church? On this rock, I will build my church. If you're not aware, the original language of the New Testament was Greek. And of course, language changes throughout the centuries. The Greek word here for church is ekklesia. Ekklesia. Can you say that? Ekklesia. Very good. You're fluent. Beautiful. You know as much as I do at this point. Ekklesia means gathering, a gathering of people. At that time, it didn't necessarily just mean a church gathering, like a religious gathering. It just meant a gathering of people, ekklesia. Today, when we think of church, oftentimes people will think of this, the building. This is the church, right? Sometimes people will think of the time of worship. Well, we'll say something along the lines of, well, on Sunday mornings, I go to church, right? The second one's a little bit closer to the true meaning of ecclesia here, but ecclesia is a gathering of people. And a lot of times we will say this, and I think most of you probably have said this at some point in your lives. If you've been part of the church, you'll say, it's not the church, it's not the building that's the church, it's the people, right? I think we say that, and I pray that it really sinks in to us, that we understand that this is a building, this is not the church, you guys are the church. And that is the correct usage of what Jesus said, is the people. I will build my ecclesia, I will build my church. So now we ask the question, is Jesus building his church on Peter, or on Peter's statement? One of the things that I love as I spend my week studying to prepare for the sermon is I look at a lot of different resources and I try to best understand what the Bible passages mean. And many times in the commentaries that I read, they will say completely opposite things. I love that, but it infuriates me at the same time. So for this passage, for this question, this argument, one of the big points a lot of people will make here is that we have two different Greek words used for rock in verse 18. You are Peter, Petros, and on this rock, Petra, I will build my church. We have two different words, Petros, Petra. And since there are two different words here, there's no way that Jesus is referring to Peter as the rock, since he uses Petra instead of Petros in the second part of the verse. You guys all glazed over now after I said all that? Okay, we got more to go. Just hold on here. So, and this sounds like a pretty solid argument when you start to think about it. But then you read another commentary and it points something else out. Yes, the New Testament was written in Greek. This was the common written language of the time. Notice I said written. Not everyone spoke in Greek. And in speaking to the disciples, Jesus likely spoke in, does anybody know what he probably would have spoken in? Aramaic. Yes, Aramaic. Aramaic it's similar to Hebrew. It's kind of a dialect of Hebrew, but it is its own language. And the word in Aramaic for rock is kepha. Kepha, K-E-P-H-A in our English transliteration, kepha. Now for some of you that word might start to sound a little familiar. Kepha, boy, I think I've heard something similar at some point. Well, let me read to you from 1 Corinthians 1:12. 1 Corinthians 1:12 says, what I mean is this is Paul speaking. One of you says, I follow Paul. Another says, I follow Apollo. Another says, I follow Cephas. Still another, I follow Christ. Some may pronounce Cephas as Cephas, because there's a C instead of a K in there sometimes. Who is Cephas? Who is Cephas? Anybody know? It's Paul. Paul is Cephas. Paul is Cephas. However you want to pronounce that. Peter. Did I say Paul? I meant Peter. Let's go back. It's Peter. I'm lost. Let's just start over. It's Peter. Cephas is Peter. So Simon is Peter. Peter is Peter. Cephas or Cephas is Peter. Kepha, the Aramaic word kepha is rock. The Greek word Petros or Peter is rock. You catching the theme here? We keep saying rock all over the place. The thing with Cephas, though, the word Cephas in the Aramaic, there is no masculine or feminine form in the Aramaic. So likely what Jesus said here, if I combine the English and the Aramaic, you are Kepha, and on this Kepha I will build my church. Since there is no difference in the wording here, is Jesus talking about Peter? Or is Jesus talking about the statement Peter made? Did you follow what I was saying there? So the argument that comes out a little bit is that in the Greek, lesson number 1 in seminary is like don't do Greek word studies in sermons, which is totally accurate because I see half of you are asleep at this point, and I don't blame you. But the point I'm trying to make here is the argument is that in the Greek we have two different words for rock, but in what Jesus actually physically would have said, we do not have different words. We have the same word for rock. Are we clear? Okay. I was so excited when I was writing this yesterday. It's like, this is such cool stuff, man. I love this. So is Jesus talking about Peter? Is Jesus talking about the statement Peter made? Or could he be talking about something else? All right, we're going to get a little more exciting here. No more Greek and Aramaic. I can barely speak English, so we'll go here. So the idea that I'm going to present might sound familiar to some of you guys. I believe in Pursuit of Peter. It was in Pursuit of Peter. It was a Bible study that we did in our FBC Compass class maybe a year and a half ago when I was teaching that class. This is my plug for our Sunday morning Bible studies. Go to FBC Compass. You will learn many, many things. Probably not Greek. So that's great. So our very first verse of this section was Matthew 16:13, which says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi. I have a map to show here. I know it's really difficult to see, but you can kind of see up in the, a little bit above and to the left of center, you can see Caesarea Philippi. On the left-hand side, sorry, your right. Man, I am off today. Stage right, that's where it is. You can see that that's the region of Caesarea Philippi. So if we were looking at today's map, this would be parts of modern-day Lebanon, modern-day Syria, modern-day northern Israel, Golan Heights area. Borders are complicated, but just to kind of get an idea of what's going on over there. So geographically, that's where we're looking. We're probably talking 30 to 40 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. Now, Caesarea Philippi is a very pagan area. So for a bunch of fairly devout Jewish dudes to be brought there by their rabbi, brought there by their teacher, this is a pretty crazy field trip for them to take. The city of Caesarea Philippi is at the foot of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is a mountain that has a lot of fissures and caves and all kinds of things like that. And one of these caves was believed to be the entrance to the underworld, the entrance to the next life, the passageway to death. I read in one of my sources here that at one point they tried to figure out how deep this cave went, and they did soundings of it, and it was so deep that they couldn't actually figure out how deep it was. So when they did this, they thought, well, it's so deep we can't figure out how deep it is, so it must just keep on going. It's never ending, meaning this is the literal opening to hell. This is the gates of Hades, and that's what Jesus says. I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. This cave known as the gates of Hades. Again, Hades being the afterlife, also known to Jewish people at this time, they probably would have called it Sheol. Today, our idea of the afterlife is kind of simple, right? It's heaven, it's hell. Those are your options. In the first century, it was a little bit, a little more complex, I would say. It was a little bit different than what we have today, and we don't really have time to discuss all those ideas today. First, because I don't have time, and second, I don't understand it myself all that well. There's a lot to consider there. But envision this for a second. There is every chance in the world that Jesus is sitting with the disciples at the literal gates of Hades, talking about all these things, saying, these gates of Hades, this thing that you're looking at right now, this cave entrance right here, it will not overcome. Hades will not overcome. It will not defeat my church. Death will not win. So the disciples are sitting around at the gates of Hades, a physical location that they're looking at, and Jesus says, this, gates of Hades, will not defeat my church. So we have a third option now as to what the rock could be, because this cave is obviously rocky. So is our rock, is it Peter? Is our rock Peter? Is our rock Peter's statement? Or is the rock the rocky cave that is the gates of Hades? Jesus will build his church on top of the gates of Hades to defeat it. So which one is it? Can we settle a 500-year debate today? You think we can? So when Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church, what is he referring to? Are you guys ready? You don't seem ready. You want me to go back to the Greek? No. The rock, it's Peter. 100%, it's Peter. I have no doubt in my mind, it's Peter. Well, Mike, why couldn't you have said that 15 minutes ago? Thanks, that's great. I'm sorry, but we had to go through this journey together. Now, before I lose my Protestant membership card by saying that the rock is Peter, or I get a call from Greg tomorrow, Mike, did you really say to everybody that the Catholics were right? I think we got to talk about that a little bit more. Did you really say that? I do believe Jesus is referring to Peter here, but not in the way the Roman Catholic Church believes he's referring to Peter here. Now, the gates of Hades thing, I think that's just a perfect setting for this moment. What a great place to talk about this. I don't think Jesus means he's building his church on the gates of Hades, at least in part because that can kind of give us a weird picture that if we misinterpret this, if we really take this the wrong way, we might think that he's saying the foundation of my church is the gates of hell, and that's not at all what the foundation of the church is, of course. The foundation of the church, the cornerstone of the church, is Jesus Christ. So why do I say that Peter is the rock and not Peter's statement? For it to be the statement and not Peter, we have to do some grammatical gymnastics that just really don't work here. Okay? So you remember all that Greek from a little bit ago, Petros, Petra, Kepha, Ecclesia, all that fun stuff. When we look at all the language behind our Bible, it just doesn't work for the rock to be Peter's statement. Now, when I started studying this this week, I really kind of wanted it to be the gates of Hades thing. Because how cool would that be? I mean, what a cool visual we would have there if that's what it was. But that wasn't the answer. It was really obvious that that's not the answer. And then I reverted to the whole, well, it must be Peter's statement that we're talking about here. But after reading all the analyses, I came to understand that Jesus really does mean Peter here. So does that mean the Catholic Church has it right and then we're wrong? Am I going to tell everybody, okay, let's all pack up, we're going to go to Catholic Church after this? No, of course not. I don't believe that. I don't believe Jesus is establishing one all-powerful human earthly leader for the global church. We can understand this, both the rock being Peter and Jesus not establishing a pope figure, if we look a little bit at the early church history. So every time we get a list of the apostles, the disciples, or the 12 closest to Jesus, who's listed first? Peter. Every one of our lists, Peter is listed first. He's clearly the most important. He's clearly the closest to Jesus. It doesn't mean the others aren't important. It just means that Peter is kind of the guy. Peter holds a higher place. If we look into the book of Acts, the book of Acts is telling the story of the early church after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. Who is the most prominent person in the first chunk of the book of Acts? Who is really functioning as the leader of the church in the early part of the book of Acts? It's Peter. Peter is the most prominent person in there. There are a lot of other important figures as well, and not everything Peter did was right, but who gave the big message on the day of Pentecost when the church exploded to thousands of people? It was Peter, right? And then by the time Paul comes on the scene after he's called by Jesus, Paul has to correct Peter on some things. So yes, the building of Jesus' church rests on Peter's shoulders, but it's also on John's shoulders. It's also on James's shoulders. It's also on Andrew's shoulders and Paul's shoulders. And it's on our shoulders today to continue that tradition. Remember too, Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church. Not Peter's church. Jesus doesn't say, hey, Peter, man, build us a church. Build a church. Call it Peter's church. Jesus says, my church. Yes, Peter is the rock, but the church belongs to Jesus. Part 2. All right, we're good. I don't think I have nearly as much Greek in this part. The second part here is the statement that Peter makes. We start in this section with Jesus asking the disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Now, it doesn't really convey it well in the English here, but what's really going on is Jesus is kind of going around in a circle to the disciples. And, hey, John, who do people say the Son of Man is? Well, James, how about you? What are people saying? Andrew, have you heard anything? Judas, how about you? Other Judas, how about you? And you're getting all these answers. Well, I heard that you're a prophet. I heard that people are saying that you're John the Baptist. People are saying that you're Elijah. People are saying this. People are saying this. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds good. You can kind of picture Jesus listening to that, can't you? Oh, they say I'm John the Baptist, huh? Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, we hung out together. I don't know how that works, but, oh, I'm Elijah. Hey, that's kind of a neat one. Yeah, all right, awesome. You can kind of picture Jesus hearing all this as he's talking to the disciples. That's great. But then Jesus changes the question. And he asks the disciples the question of questions. The question all of us need to find an answer to at some point in our lives if we've heard the name of Jesus. The question of questions. Jesus asked, "Who do you say I am?" The people out there, people will say he's a prophet. People will say he's a smart guy. People will say he's a dude with some great ideas. Some people think he's a liar. Some people think he never even existed. History proves that idea false, but some people still think that. But a lot of people have a lot of ideas as to who Jesus is. Many people know a lot of things about Jesus, but it's one thing to know about Jesus. It's something different to know Jesus. Who do you say Jesus is? This is the question of questions. And Peter gives us the answer of answers. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. I can stand up here and tell you all kinds of things about Jesus. I could stand on a street corner in a major city and tell people about Jesus. I could have a conversation with a stranger in McDonald's, tell them about Jesus. And I can state all kinds of facts about Jesus. I can tell people about the wisdom of Jesus. Love your enemies, feed the hungry, house the homeless, share, give, love. I can talk about the geography of the region. I can talk about traveling around in the Roman Empire and how it impacted the lives of people in first century Galilee and Judea. And those would all be truthful statements. Jesus said all those things. Geographically, the road from Jerusalem to Jericho goes downhill. That's a fact. The Roman Empire was oppressive. That's a fact. Jesus is the Son of God. I know the truth of that statement. I know the truth of Peter's statement, that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the Son of the living God. But that part, someone can only know if God tells them it's true. Matthew 16:17. Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." Human knowledge, human intelligence has limitations. We can learn a lot of things. We can figure a lot of things out. People can calculate how to send a satellite into orbit. Some people can. I can't. People can learn how to fix an engine in a car. Well, someone had to figure out how to invent that engine in the first place. We can learn the original languages from the Old and the New Testament and try to figure out the minutia of every word and every syllable and every letter. And we can dissect every story to glean any wisdom from it that we can. But our knowledge cannot tell us if Jesus is the Son of the living God. We cannot calculate the odds of Jesus being the Messiah and say, well, he is, because I figured out there's probably about an 87% chance that he is statistically, so statistically he's got it. That's not how that works. We can only know that Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God, our Savior. We can only know that if God reveals it to us. And when God reveals it to us, we then need to accept that as fact. You are loved. You matter. You matter to God. You matter to me. God loves you so much, he sent his Son to earth to die, so that through his death, our sins could be forgiven. And through his resurrection, the door to heaven would be opened. I love you. And I love God. And that means I need to tell as many people as I can about Jesus. That he is the Messiah. That he is the Son of the living God. Now I'm going to say that again in just a moment, who Jesus is. And as you listen to my words, I want you to listen to that voice inside of you. I want you to feel that stirring in your chest. And I want you to hear what God is revealing to you about who Jesus is. So I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Close your eyes, listen to what I say, and listen to what God says to you. Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. He came to earth to save sinners. He came to earth to save me and to save you. We can be saved because Jesus went to the cross. He bled. He died. In that, we may have forgiveness if we believe. Then he came back to life. When he ascended to heaven, he gave us a path to be with the Father. Do you believe all that? Has God revealed to you that this is the truth? You can open your eyes if you'd like. Has God revealed to you that this is the truth? Maybe you thought you knew that in the past. Maybe you've been somebody that's come to church every week and it's like, yeah, of course I believe in Jesus. I go to church every week. I go to worship every week. Maybe you always thought that, but now it's really become true to you. Have you come to realize that Jesus is the Messiah? He's the Messiah to the world. He is your Messiah. Surrender to Jesus today. He is the Son of the living God. Admit that you sin. Believe he died. Know he came back to life. Call on him as your Lord.